Hi, I'm Maple. Today, I'll be watching This Pokemon Was Bad, Got Worse. Want a Tournament by Wolfie. It's Mr. VGC. Hi everyone, I'm Maple. I like Pokemon. I play Super Kaizo Ironmon and the occasional Soul Link and Nuzlocke here and there. But hi, I like Pokemon. Whoa. Whoa. Okay, I'm excited to watch this with you guys. I think this was recommended me a couple of times and I kind of just clicked on it because I was like, first of all, Doggo. I like the Doggo Pokemon. But also, it reminded me of seeing that one, like, I remember a couple of years back, and by a couple of years back, I think Sword and Shield came out, 7 years ago. Fuck. Anyways, I remember back when, Sword and Shield came out, Zamazenta, compared to Zacian, was very unpopular. And by very unpopular, I mean, like, I would see piles of the Zamazenta plushie versus at the Pokemon Center versus the Zacian plushies, and there'd be, like, maybe 1 or 2 Zacian plushies left, but then there was just the entire stock of, like, Zamazenta, and I'm like, aw, the Doggo. Okay, anyways, I'm gonna watch now. To the React Corner. Whoa.
Zamazenta was one of the saddest Pokemon ever created. It lived its entire life in the shadow of its strong—
Oh my god, Kyogre and Groudon! I played that format, what? This is like the only format I talk about because like that's when I tried out competitive Sword and Shield.
better big brother. But then, after 3 years of mediocrity, it got nerfed, losing several of its best tools. And then it won a major tournament and established itself as one of the top threats in Scarlet and Violet. How did this happen? Well, to understand, we have to go back to prehistoric times, when Sword and Shield released. A new game release is exciting. There's a new region to explore.
You know, I'm too curious. Let me take a look at something real quick. When did Pokemon Sword and Shield come out? 2019. Ah, holy shit, that was pre-COVID. Oh my god, wait, that's right. Sword and Shield was COVID format.
New characters to meet, and most importantly, new things to complain about. For competitive players, a new game means a whole new influx of Pokemon.
New influx of Pokemon, and you know what that also means for a new game? The new gimmick.
Of which are good, some of which are Obstagoon. And few of these additions are more important than the Pokemon on the covers of—
I love this one, but I can't imagine the final evolution of a Pokemon is just basically being Parenthood. Ah, I'm not built for that, bro.
The games. In this case, that's Zacian and Zamazenta. There was gonna be a game with Eternatus on the cover, but it didn't fit. The reason these Pokemon matter so much is because of what is usually the final rule set of competitive play each generation. Competitive play traditionally follows a 3-year cycle, where the first year of each generation allows only the 400 or so Pokemon catchable in the base games. The second year expands that and allows all Pokemon that you can transfer in, and the final year allows powerful, restricted Pokemon. Restricted Pokemon are basically like the big dog legendary Pokemon, including any legendary on the—
I like the enemy sound effect. Boom. But yeah, back to the restricted.
Transfer in, and the final year allows power—
Yeah. I had such a balls to the wall Gamba style like Sun team because I believe my moveset basically said, okay, so anyways, this is 70% accuracy, but if it hits, I win. I missed a lot, don't worry.
Powerful, restricted Pokemon. Restricted Pokemon are basically like the big dog legendary Pokemon, including any legendary on the cover of a game. And you're only allowed to use 1 or 2 of them on your team. And there aren't that many of them. Because these Pokemon are, well, legendary, the pool of restricted Pokemon is relatively small.
You know, I went with the Sun team, but like really, compared to Groudon, Kyogre is kind of my favorite out of like those two because when I played Ruby and Sapphire, I played both of them, right? I kind of like gravitated a little bit more towards Kyogre, despite the fact that Kyogre's entire like thing in like Pokemon Sapphire was, you know, Team Aqua try to make the world drown. And I can't swim. I don't know why I like Kyogre so much. Maybe I just like Big Whale.
Pool of good restricted Pokemon within this already short list is extremely shallow. In 2016, the year I won the World Championships, there were basically 4 good restricted Pokemon. And since each team used 2 restricteds, there wasn't that much variety. So the opportunity to add more diversity in with a new game's release is a surprisingly big deal. And these games delivered in spades, with the addition of Zacian, arguably the strongest restricted Pokemon in Sword and Shield. And that's saying something because because these games also added Calyrex. What made Zacian so broken was, well, basically everything. It has some of the best stats out of any Pokemon ever. Most notably, its speed, which is higher than every single restricted Pokemon that was released before Gen 8, plus
And also Zacian's like typing, like Steel Fairy is just an insane typing.
the ones in Gen 9, its ridiculously good bulk, and its sky-high attack stat. It also has arguably the single best typing in the game as a fairy and steel-type Pokemon. When I ranked every single type combination in the game, this is the one that I had at number 1.
Do I watch that one now? I feel like I should watch that. He's giving me recommendations, guys. This one's for me. Oh, well, it's for everybody. But this one, I feel like is for me right now.
It's a battle, win or lose. It's the friends you make. Subscribe or you will lose. I'm Small Meeple. Bye.
And then there's the ability. Zacian's stats are already good, but its ability Intrepid Sword gives it an attack boost every single time it switches in. This is functionally a 50% increase to Zacian's attack stat, which was already higher than every other legal restricted Pokemon, and just barely below Pokemon like Primal Groudon and Mega Rayquaza. In other words, Zacian was basically 50% stronger than Primal Groudon and Mega Rayquaza, and this attack boost would activate whenever Zacian switched in, making it extremely difficult to get rid of since switching Zacian out would remove all attack drops, letting it re-enter play later with its boosted attack stat once more. As if this weren't bad enough, we haven't even talked about the most broken aspect of Zacian yet, its signature move. Behemoth Blade is a 100% accurate 100 base power move with no drawback.
Also, inflicting twice the damage to the target that's Dynamax. Oh, Zacian, you're so silly, so powerful, so silly.
Instead, this move does double damage to Dynamax Pokemon. Dynamax was the central mechanic of Sword and Shield, and the competitive scene revolved around it. It not only powered up your Pokemon's moves and gave them all secondary effects, but this once per battle effect also doubled a Dynamax Pokemon's HP, a benefit that Zacian can effectively ignore. They tried to balance Zacian by preventing it from Dynamaxing, but because Behemoth Blade is so strong, you wouldn't really have wanted to Dynamax it anyway, as it would have resulted in Zacian doing less damage against opposing Dynamax Pokemon. Zacian was the single most used restricted Pokemon in Sword and Shield, appearing on a whopping 66% of teams at the World Championships, despite players only
Oh, guys, you didn't mention it. Incineroar spotted. That's the guy.
being allowed to use 2 restricted Pokemon on a team. Not only was it the most used restricted, it was the second most used Pokemon in the entire tournament, behind only the king himself, Incineroar.
My bad. I should have waited. He mentioned it.
For a restricted Pokemon to be used this often, it needs to be unbelievably strong. But Zacian wasn't the only restricted Pokemon added in Sword and Shield. These games weren't Sword and Ultra Sword 2. Not that you'd know it from looking at the competitive scene. Nobody used Zamazenta. Well, sorry, that isn't entirely true. One single person used Zamazenta throughout the entirety of Sword and Shield, finishing in the top 64 at 2 events. Apart from Zamazenta's strongest soldier, nobody else wanted to touch the Shield Dog. But why? Well, Zacian and Zamazenta are paired legendaries, which means they have some similarities. I'd actually argue that Zacian and Zamazenta are more similar than several other legendary pairs like Ho and Lugia, Solgaleo and Lunala, and maybe even Pikachu and Eevee. They both need to hold a special item in order to transform into their crowned form, which is the only one worth using. They're both steel type, they both get a stat boost when they switch in, and they both have a signature move that deals double damage to Dynamax Pokemon. Also, they're both dogs. So why then did nobody want to use Zamazenta? It's worse than Zacian in every single way. First, the typing. Fighting and Steel is good typing, but it's nowhere near as good as Steel and Fairy. Zamazenta has more weaknesses and fewer resistances and immunities than Zacian. Plus, Fairy is one of the best offensive types in the game because so few Pokemon are actually able to resist it. One of the main reasons to use Zamazenta is that its fighting typing is useful to hit opposing Steel and Dark types. But the thing is, despite not being a fighting type Pokemon, they gave Zacian one of the best fighting type moves in the game, Sacred Sword. Normally, this would still leave Zamazenta a niche because moves become stronger when they're used by a Pokemon that matches the type of the move. Except this same type attack bonus is 50%, which happens to be the exact same boost that Zacian's ability gives. In other words, Zacian using a fighting move is going to do more damage than Zamazenta using that same move. Speaking of abilities, Zamazenta's is just the inferior version here too. Dauntless Shield functions just like Intrepid Sword, except instead of giving an attack boost, it grants a defense boost.
You know, I've had Pokemon, for me, I had Pokemon Sword, right? So I guess it makes sense that the Shield version just gets the exact same ability, except it pluses defense instead. Like, defense is nice, but attack help you kill things. If you kill the problem, you don't have any more problem. Sorry, Zacian. I mean, sorry, Zamazenta, but you see, for Zacian, if with the attack boost, if you simply kill the problem faster, you no longer have the problem. For like Zamazenta, if you outlive the problem, that's cool, but it's simply quicker to get the attack boost and then kill your problem. Which in this case, your opponent's Pokemon, by the way. I should probably mention that, by the way. Whoa.
It's hard to overstate how underwhelming this is. This defense boost is totally worthless when Zamazenta is getting hit with a special attack. Plus, Zamazenta's already high defense stat doesn't really need a boost. Think of it this way. Zacian's ability boosts the damage of 100% of its attacks, but Zamazenta's ability only reduces roughly half of all damage that comes in. To add insult to injury, this damage reduction can be achieved in a much easier way, by using the ability Intimidate, which reduces the physical attack stats of both the opponent's Pokemon. So Zacian being supported by, I don't know, Incineroar kind of gets the benefit of Dauntless Shield without needing to forfeit its own ability. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, just a reminder to check if you're subscribed. My team and I work really hard on these videos, and we care a lot about them being high quality.
Appreciate it, bro.
So if you're enjoying the content and you think you might want to see more in the future, just do me a favor and double check. Lots of people think they're subscribed and they actually aren't, and so I feel like I should say something, you know? Anyway, this defense boost also makes Zamazenta's signature move worse, despite being identical to Zacian's in all but name. Behemoth Bash is also a 100 power, 100 accuracy steel move that does double damage to Dynamax Pokemon, but with Zamazenta's lower attack stat and lacking attack boost, it's a lot more underwhelming than its stabby sibling Spectacular Sword Swing. So while competitive players were leaving Zamazenta on the—
this is the picture! This is the picture I'm referring to! Oh my god! It's in the video! Oh my god, wait, I'm pretty sure I already asked, at this point I'm probably already asked my editor to add the picture in the beginning, but can you add it again? Like right here. So that way I can be like, yo, it's the picture, but like again, what? Thank you.
The shelf, Zacian would go on to not only dominate competitive play, but win the world championships, as well as most of the other events throughout the year. To be honest, it was clear that things needed to change. Zacian needed to be nerfed and Zamazenta needed to be buffed, but that isn't possible because Zacian and Zamazenta are paired legendaries. Paired legendaries need to be kept equivalent in terms of their base stat totals and the way that any of their signature moves or abilities function. In other words, if Zacian was going to be brought back down to earth, Zamazenta would have to come plummeting down along with it. And that's what happened. Zamazenta paid the price for crimes it didn't commit. In Scarlet and Violet, both Zacian and Zamazenta were nerfed hard. Zacian lost a whopping 20 points out of its attack stat, and that meant Zamazenta had to shed 20 points too. The reasonable thing would have been to take them out of its special attack, a stat that Zamazenta doesn't use, because again, Zamazenta didn't need to be nerfed.
You see, he's building up that the reasonable thing to do. I don't think I feel like Game Freak was not reasonable about this because I remember hearing about the Zamazenta, I mean not the Zamazenta, the Zacian nerf. I didn't hear about the Zamazenta one, but I'm going to assume he's building up to, yeah, they took away 20 of his attack also.
Would you like to guess how much special attack Zamazenta lost? A grand total of 0. Instead, Zamazenta lost 10 attack, 5 defense, and 5 special defense. But the stat nerf wasn't enough. Game Freak wasn't taking any chances with Zacian this time around, now that they didn't need to sell any more copies of Sword. The arguably bigger nerf to Zacian is the change to its ability. While Intrepid Sword used to activate every single time Zacian switched in, it now only activates the first time Zacian hits the field each battle, making it way more manageable. Of course, this also meant that Zamazenta's ability had to change too. So Dauntless Shield received the same nerf, now working only once per battle. These two nerfs were given to Zacian, but it was deceived, for another nerf was made. This may come as a shock, but I feel like I need to tell you. In Scarlet and Violet, Dynamax Pokemon were removed from the game.
That's crazy. I can't believe it. We traded Dynamax for the hats. Ah, that's crazy. That's crazy. What? Yeah.
That means that both Zacian and Zamazenta's signature moves went from having arguably the best secondary effect in the game to not having one at all. Oh yeah, one final nerf to these moves to add insult to injury is that the animations are way less cool now than they were in Sword and Shield.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's like the biggest nerf of all. The animations in Sword and Shield. Because I remember really liking the animation for Zacian when after uses Behemoth Blade. Oh, that sucks, man.
A base stat nerf, an ability nerf, and a signature move nerf.
Okay, you can recover from the stat nerf, but like the animation, you have to look cool.
Game Freak was done pulling punches, and it worked. As of May 2024, restricted Pokemon are usable in Scarlet and Violet for the first time, and Zacian usage has plummeted. While it's still usable, it's not a top threat. In fact, it's mostly found success as an anti-meta pick that most players are unprepared for, which is pretty nuts to say about the former king of Sword and Shield, but I don't know, Viva La Vida or whatever. I think probably some of you will get that. Some of you will definitely get that. But what
I don't get references in general. I have not been exposed to much media growing up. Like, my childhood consists of like, here's like the few games I played as a kid. Anyways, I watched like Finding Nemo because like my sister had like the DVD for it, and basically it was like the movie I had to watch with her like 20 times. So whenever people are like, hey Maple, do you recognize that movie and that actor? I go, no. Should I remind you of my childhood? Anyways, it's fine.
about Zamazenta, who received all of these nerfs too? Surely even its sole believer has given up on it now, right? Zamazenta has become one of the top threats in the format, and at times has even been the #1 most used restricted Pokemon. How is this possible? Well, I haven't told you about just one little thing yet. In addition to all of the nerfs, Zamazenta also received a singular buff. Not a base stat increase or an upgrade to its ability, no. Zamazenta got access to a new move. Body Press.
Oh.
Body Press is an 80 base power fighting move, 50% weaker than the more well-known Close Combat. It can't miss and it has no drawback, but if that were it, it would be unremarkable. What makes Body Press special is that it has a unique property. It is the only move in the entire game that deals its damage based off the user's defense stat instead of their attack. Why Zamazenta did not get this move to begin with, I do not know, but it truly changed everything for the Shield dog. The thing is, Body Press lets a Pokemon use its defense stat offensively, but it also still uses its defense stat, you know, defensively. So the tankier a Pokemon is on the physical side, the more damage it does with Body Press, and the harder it is to get rid of. It's like a buy one get one free kind of deal. Body Press factors in boost to the defense stat as well. We've actually seen several Pokemon build entire sets around this concept. Pokemon like Hisui and Gudra, Bronzong, and Ferrothorn have all run the combination of Iron Defense and Body Press, with Iron Defense boosting their defense stats to let Body Press do absurd amounts of damage. But Iron Defense isn't the only way to get defense boosts. I can think of a certain ability that activates without needing to spend a turn setting up. So Zamazenta's defense boost went from being more or less useless to invaluable overnight. And there's something else to consider too. See, physical attackers typically struggle against the Intimidate ability that we talked about earlier. This is part of the reason Zacian fell off so hard.
Oh, so yeah, then Zamazenta doesn't really have to care about the Intimidate ability since Body Press uses defensive stats instead. It's kind of crazy that getting access to like a singular move, despite all the nerfs that Game Freak gave, it's like, first of all, the animation, and then the stats and like the ability only activating once per battle instead of like every time it re-enters. Getting access to just one singular move changes a Pokemon so much, and I find that really cool.
While other physical attacking restricted Pokemon can now use the new Clear Amulet item, which nullifies stat drops, Zacian has to hold the Rusted Sword to be strong. This wasn't such a problem in Sword and Shield where you could just switch out and get the attack boost again later, but it's a real problem now, but not for Zamazenta. There's no defense lowering equivalent of Intimidate, and thank goodness for that. So while it's pretty easy to get rid of Zacian's boost, bringing Zamazenta back down to earth is way harder. And
I don't know, could you imagine Wolfie if he had to deal with like, and by Wolfie, I mean also people in general, but he is the guy that memes about Incineroar I know of the most because I watch like these videos. I don't know, man. I feel like, let me find Let me find him. Real
There's
quick.
no defense lowering equivalent of Intimidate, and
I don't know how he'd look after if Pokemon Game Freak ever introduces Intimidate, except it's also for defense. Those poor VGC players.
thank goodness for that. So while it's pretty easy to get rid of Zacian's boost, bringing Zamazenta back down to Earth is way harder. And Zamazenta's defense boost still works against these powerful restricted Pokemon using the Clear Amulet item to stop Intimidate, another new bonus. And gaining access to Body Press allowed Zamazenta's typing to become fully unlocked. I told you before that Zacian's typing was strictly better than Zamazenta's in almost every way, and that Zacian using the same fighting type move as Zamazenta would be stronger. All of that was only true when Body Press was off the table. Those Iron Defense Body Press users that I mentioned, Bronzong, Ferrothorn, Gudra, you might notice that none of them are fighting types. Remember that same type attack bonus we talked about earlier, where Pokemon using moves that match one of their types get a whopping 50% stronger? Well, Zamazenta is a fighting type Pokemon, and Body Press is a fighting type move. In other words, Zamazenta using Body Press is not only threatening because of its high natural defense stat, but it also gets 50% stronger because of the defense boost from Dauntless Shield, and another 50% stronger because Zamazenta is a fighting type. This makes Zamazenta completely unlike any of the other Body Press users that we've seen before, because it doesn't have to waste a turn setting up in order to do tons of damage. But Body Press does have a weakness. It can't do any damage to Ghost type Pokemon. However, the #1 most used Ghost type in Scarlet and Violet is Fluttermane, a Ghost and Fairy type Pokemon. And Fairy type Pokemon are weak to Steel. So Zamazenta comes built in with a one-hit KO on the most common Ghost type, though the Steel move it uses actually isn't its signature move Behemoth Bash. Instead, it's Heavy Slam, which does more damage depending on how much heavier the user is than the target. And Zamazenta is heavy, which probably has something to do with the giant metal shield it's been lugging around.
I think I'd be disappointed if Zamazenta wasn't heavy. Like, a lot of times Pokemon like weights don't exactly make too much sense, whether it's like limitations in the older games itself being like, oh, you can only go up to like 999 or whatever. But it's just like, yeah, no, yeah, I feel like the metal Doggo should be heavy.
Beyond just doing damage, Zamazenta also has some other interesting options too. Iron Defense can make it basically invincible on the physical side and boost Body Press's damage to ungodly levels, whereas Wide Guard provides valuable team-wide support against many of the powerful restricted Pokemon like Calyrex, Terapagos, and Kyogre. Dynamax didn't help Zamazenta much at all because not only was it incapable of using it, but Behemoth Bash was just so lackluster compared to Behemoth Blade. Terastallization is a different story. Zamazenta is able to use Terastallization defensively. If you thought getting rid of one of the tankiest restricted Pokemon was difficult before, good luck hitting it after it's gotten rid of its weaknesses. Zamazenta tends to use Terastallization to gain resistances to key types, like using Terra Dragon to resist fire and water moves, or uses it to get around Amoonguss with Terra Grass, becoming immune to Spore and Rage Powder. And that's not the only new addition in Scarlet and Violet that helped redeem Zamazenta. These games added a new Pokemon with excellent synergy with the dog, Chen Pao. Chen Pao can use its dark typing to hit the ghost types that Zamazenta doesn't appreciate, like Goldengo, Calyrex Shadow, and the classic ghost type, Terra Ghost Incineroar. More than that, its ability pairs really nicely with Zamazenta. Sword of Ruin lowers the defense stats of all other Pokemon on the field, including Zamazenta, but for some reason, this drop doesn't affect Body Press's damage. With one more modifier under its belt, Zamazenta's Body Press starts doing unholy amounts of damage. And because Zamazenta's already so tanky, it doesn't mind having its defense lowered slightly. One move and one new buddy might not sound like a massive shakeup, but it changed everything for Zamazenta. See, Zamazenta plays differently than most of the other restricted Pokemon, who try and overwhelm their opponent with their ridiculous offensive moves. Zamazenta is different. It does still do damage, but rather than wiping the entire board in a single turn, it instead excels at being extremely difficult to get rid of and consistently outputting damage every turn over the entire course of the battle.
Yeah, no, I'm still thinking about how the ability doesn't affect Zamazenta's like body press damage, because I'm just like, I would expect it to. I'm still a bit hung up on that. Don't worry about it.
It's one of the best designed defensive restricted Pokemon that we've ever had. And it helps that in Scarlet and Violet, a lot of the popular Pokemon just can't really do anything to Zamazenta. Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Clefairy are some of the more common support Pokemon, and none of them appreciate fighting Zamazenta. And even Urshifu doesn't really like going up against the dog if it terastallizes into a water resistance. Moreover, fighting has nice offensive coverage right now, hitting most Pokemon in the competitive ecosystem for at least neutral damage. More importantly, Zamazenta also beats nearly every other restricted Pokemon, at least in a vacuum. The physical attackers can't easily get through the defense boost. Calyrex Ice was looking like the #1 restricted Pokemon until Zamazenta came along. Groudon and Rayquaza have fallen off hard and can't break through the defense boost.
No, Rayquaza's like my favorite. I can't believe bro fell off.
And even Koraidon, who should match up well against Mr. Dog, needs to watch out for a Terra Dragon or support from Pelipper. Kyogre and Calyrex Shadow both rely heavily on their spread moves, which can be shut down by Wide Guard. And the new restricted Pokemon Terrapagos isn't able to terastallize out of its fighting weakness or easily get around Zamazenta's Wide Guard. Somehow, in spite of everything, Zamazenta matches up well against nearly every other restricted Pokemon. And that's probably why at the first US tournament where restricted Pokemon were allowed, Zamazenta made it all the way into the quarterfinals despite not being a popular pick at all. This proved that the Pokemon had potential, which is maybe why at a tournament the following week in Europe, Zamazenta was the most used restricted Pokemon on the second day of competition and even won the entire tournament. That's right, Zamazenta went from a Pokemon that most players wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole to the #1 most used restricted Pokemon at a
Overheat, like, missing over there. Does it have a 90 accuracy? I don't remember exactly. Editor, can you fact check? Can you, like, fact check that for me? Put it on screen. Whoa! But if it does have a 90 accuracy, well, if it's not 100%, it's a 50-50. You're the hit or you don't.
tournament and the champion despite being nerfed into the ground. And all it took was gaining access to a single unassuming move that it probably should have had all along. Pokemon is an incredibly complex game, and there's so many factors that go into determining whether or not a Pokemon is good that it can make your head spin if you think about it for too long. Zamazenta's story might be one of my personal favorites that I've ever seen in my 13 years competing. And it's a good reminder that sometimes all a Pokemon needs is that one missing piece. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like hearing about legendary Pokemon that caught people off guard, you might like this video about how Miraidon, one of the strongest new legendary Pokemon, was completely underestimated by the vast majority of competitive players, and why that ultimately ended up biting them pretty hard.
Oh, why? Oh my god. Hello there. Gang. It was a lot of fun. Anyways, I guess I enjoyed that video because I'm just like, I like the doggos. I like the Sword and Shield doggos. Oh my god, I definitely played through Sword and Shield. I don't think I got to the second DLC. I feel like I bought it. But I'm not too sure if I remember playing through the second DLC. All I remember is that I had that DLC. Maybe it was the second one. There's that girl with pink hair who's really toxic. She was neat. Okay, anyways, that was a lot of fun. If you guys have more recommendations for me to watch, put them below. I read them. I'm not good at responding to a lot of comments, but I do like to scroll through and just be like, neat. I respond in my head, you know? Anyways, bye!